see all the time on social media. Until you're a mother, no one understands what it takes. The late nights, early mornings, sleepless days. Does it have to be like that?
And whilst it is, that isn't the vision for children. If that happens, the parent doesn't reflect enough to know that they are the source.
That children can't be what they can't see because
Yeah.
they learn everything from us.
We don't really know how to navigate that later in life if we've never had the opportunity to navigate it early on.
So I wanted to start off with something that I see all the time on social media. And we spoke briefly about it before, but so I'm just going to read this thing and then a question will follow. So it says, until you're a mother, no one understands what it takes. The late nights, early mornings, sleepless days, not eating, etc., because you're so busy trying to tend to your children. Whether you have help or not, a mother's job is never done. No one understands the mental strength you have to have when it comes to being a mum. Not being able to rest your mind because it's constantly going all day and night. No one understands that postpartum is real and it never ends. It creates insecurities, anxiety, and depression. It makes you feel different and act different. No one understands that even with tears in your eyes, you never really have time to stop to take care of yourself because being a mum is 100 jobs in one. So it's like the concept of this is what I feel, well, especially for me and a lot of other women, is things like this put the fear of God into women before having children. And like, because reading all of that, someone that doesn't have children, why on earth would they want to put themselves through that? Obviously, not knowing the massive reward that comes with it, but just reading that. So my question is like, does it have to be like that?
Yes, but it depends on what our vision for parenthood looks like. Like, if our vision for parenthood looks like the parent being constantly busy, like the parent constantly worrying and and just almost trying to run away from the day. 'Cause I mean, like it does happen a lot where a parent feels overwhelmed with scenarios, with the late nights, with the like with also not knowing sometimes on how to also be a parent. I think we've come away from what it is to be a parent, and obviously, like you're saying, like this is the picture that's now painted, the picture of that it is awfully difficult, and whilst it is, that isn't the vision for children. Like the vision for children should be uh, an approach on responsibility for an individual to pass on knowledge, right? And to create a life for your children that 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 makes a better world. And approaching parenthood with this vision does sort of make you dread it. It makes it hard to think, yeah, I really want this. Like how like this is what I would like in my life. And so all of those things are true, but do we use them for the reasons for getting pregnant in the first place? Well, largely no. Like if you plan to have a child, you know that this is the case, but you're willing to sacrifice all of those things for what comes after that and for what comes when you do have the child. Because when you have the child, there's endless reward, daily reward. There's daily struggle, but there's daily reward. And you can either choose to see more of the struggle or more of the reward. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. But yeah, it's difficult to look forward to that if that's all that's given.
See, what I think that does, that post on social media, it as a mother, and I think largely as a mother, I mean, there's aspects to fatherhood as well that I feel, but largely with motherhood, it's almost as if before you have a child, you have to say goodbye to your old life, which I
Mm,
think a lot of people aren't willing to do, and I feel like you can't do them both.
no.
Um, but I think also it's like, does the minute that you have a child, do your needs not matter anymore? Like, do the time that you feel that you need on your own is that necessary anymore? Like, just your needs for, I think largely mainly alone time and just mental space.
Hmm.
Like in that post where it says like you don't have time for that. Like, is that correct? Like, do we not need that anymore?
Well, do we give it to ourselves before having children? Like truly, like we feel like we have a lot more freedoms without the child, but those freedoms oftentimes that they create memories, but they don't create um, necessarily a sense of fulfillment. Oftentimes, the things that we're sacrificing pre-children are the things that are short-lived, are the short-term gratification, like obviously going out and hanging out with friends and just you doing more things that are fun in the moment as opposed to purposeful in your life. Now, of course, you might also have to sacrifice some things that are purposeful in your life for your children, but then your children become largely your purpose. Largely, most things that you do is then for them. But as it comes down to the does your child's needs supersede yours? In the short answer, yes. In the long answer, yes. But by doing so, you are going to have have almost accomplishment with responsibility and with the burden that comes with having children. Um, Again, if you choose to see it in a way in which responsibility leads to fulfillment, you are on average going to be happier with children than without. Um, Now, when it comes to like the mother's or the father's needs with a child, I think what you really want is a supportive partner that when the children go to sleep, you then have these conversations that you want to have during the day, but just once the kids are asleep. And like the ones where I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with this, or I observed this behavior today, it's new, I'm not quite sure how to deal with it. Can we go over it so that when it happens again, we can sort of like best approach this. Um, like those mental needs can be met. Now, also, let's say you're a single parent, because obviously not everyone has a two-parent household. Um, it doesn't obviously necessarily need to be a supportive partner. It can be a supportive member of the family, a supportive friend. Um, so long as this person is someone who is constructive and isn't just a yes man, isn't just a yes you're right and that's it, and they're just there to fuel your bias. So long as they're there to give you constructive points on whatever it is that you're struggling with, then that I think is what you need. But because you understand that children are sacrifice, like children equals sacrifice in your life, and if you're not willing to sacrifice sort of in your life, then don't plan to have a child. Or let's say it was an unplanned child, you have 9 months to get ready for that to then be the case, or like however many months from when you find out. And you can put things into place, you can put tools into place, and also there's loads of support groups as well, and mum groups, and obviously not as many father groups, but there will be places that people can go to, even if it's just online for support. So then, short answer is yes, with the child's needs superseding the parents, but the parent can get that support from other sources that isn't the short-term gratification, with the freedoms that we've had to sacrifice as a result of having children.
Mm. So, like going back to the needs of the parent, why do you feel it is that parents need breaks from their children?
I think we don't have that support system in place. So if it gets to the point of your child exhibits a behavior, this behavior triggers you and overwhelms you and puts you in a state where you're uncomfortable with dealing with it. Um, so you feel like you need a break. You need to lock yourself away for 5 minutes, go to the bathroom, whatever it is. Now, if the support system isn't there, then those types of moments are going to happen. And I think as humans, we're subject to error because there's we're not hardwired any particular way. It's just like we're hardwired through experience, and if your child exhibits behavior that you've had a negative experience with like in the past, you're very likely going to get that sense of feeling overwhelmed. And then as a result, you're going to feel the need to remove yourself from that situation, to then calm down or to have that mental break. But obviously, that occurs during the day. So if the tools aren't there for you to think, okay, this child's exhibiting this behavior, I'm feeling overwhelmed internally, just don't let it out. And I'm going to address this later with my support system, with the partner, with the family, with the friend, with my online group, like whatever it is. Um, and and there's always going to be a resource for you there. But I think it's in the moment in which that happens, sometimes as parents, we act in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise if we had thought about it. So if we act in a way that we would like to, if like child exhibits behavior, you react sort of more unconsciously, and then afterwards you come away from it and think, I probably shouldn't have shouted at them or punished them in the way that I did or spoke to them the way that I did. If you come away from that and reflect on it, well, now next time's going to be better. It's not about being perfect in the moment, and like even if you have the tools, it's not about acting in the best way possible. So long as you review whatever that thing is, and if you would like to act better towards your child in the future, then address it, and next time, progressively over time, it will happen. But yeah, the tools and the support structure are going to be really useful. And by tools, I sort of mean the ability to have the thought, to recognize that you're feeling overwhelmed, to come away from it mentally and not sort of pour that into your children, and then to review it later. Like those are the tools that I'm talking about when I mention tools, and obviously that's reinforced with the support.
Because with also with that, if as a parent we just react unconsciously, continuously, and not take accountability for how we've responded, how does that impact the child? And does the child, is that how the child learns how to respond to things?
Yeah. Um, if you exhibit behaviors that, let's say, never change towards like a positive direction, because parenthood's really difficult. Like it's something that we're not taught. It's something that also we're oftentimes not shown because families are getting smaller. And oftentimes we won't have younger siblings that we can like observe our parents parenting as we get a little bit older. Um, and as a result, when we become parents, we then obviously exhibit the experiences that we had as children. And even if, let's say, like you had a childhood that you don't want to bring onto your children, obviously that largely needs to be addressed before you also have children, or if you do have children and let's say you're wanting to go through that change. In the point that I just made about the tools and the support system, so long as you're constantly reflecting on what those behaviors that you're exhibiting that you wish to not exhibit in the future, and as long as you're reviewing them and reflecting and sort of moving forward towards something and behaviors that you would like to exhibit, then that's the goal. But if a parent, let's say, doesn't change, and if a parent punishes a child through unfair means without reason, just sometimes obviously like discipline for children is necessary, but it's how we discipline them that teaches them how to navigate the world, because there are consequences for any action. There can be positive or negative consequences, but if a child does something, and let's just use the example of you've said that they can have sweets if they do XYZ. They don't do XYZ, and you say, do this, otherwise you're not getting sweets. Now, if the child, let's say, still doesn't do whatever this thing is that the parent has outlined, but the parent didn't really want to follow through with their punishment, and they still give them sweets as a means for ease. Let's say the child is now sort of having quite a big emotion, like as a result of not getting the sweets. And if they didn't do the thing that you asked them to do, that you'd explain to them, yet you promised them sweets, you now can't give them sweets, because even if they're having a big emotion, and the sweets will stop them from crying, it will stop those internal feelings for you that are negative, that are just bubbling up, and eventually your child will learn to get away with things but still get rewarded as a result. And that, I think, as children grow up, is rather quite dangerous, because it leads them to thinking that there aren't consequences for their actions, and that positive thing is still waiting for them. Now, in the alternative to that, let's say the child doesn't do it, you don't give them sweets, they're having the emotion. Well, now just wait until they've calmed down from that emotion, right? And don't try and stop it either. Because if you try and stop it, that they'll potentially act aggressively towards you, which try not to give them the opportunity to do that. I mean, so if they start sort of kicking their legs, which oftentimes children will do when you approach them when they're having these emotions, then back off, sit about 2-3 feet away, maybe in the same room as them, just quiet, and just let them know that you're there. And then once they've finished having that emotion, they will come to you. Like, you are everything to them. So if you implement things like this, then follow through with it. Now, and then like coming back to the question a little bit with if there's negative behaviors that the parent exhibits, or the parent takes their frustration out on the children come to learn that the that the world is very unfair, but not in the way that it should be unfair. In a way that it's unfair that that I'm here for you, and the child um, is almost taken advantage of in those situations, because if the parent doesn't acknowledge their frustrations and it's being taken out on the child is just a bag. It's just something to be hit. But children are very resilient, so they'll always come back to you. Maybe until they get older and they start to really notice, but especially when they're young, if you're frustrated, you don't acknowledge it, and it gets taken out on them, they're going to feel that like a lot, and it's going to affect them in unspeakable ways that we oftentimes don't know until they get older, and then they have these insecurities, these problems, these habits that they find it so hard to get away from, because I mean, as much as people don't like the idea that everything that happens in childhood will follow them through to adulthood if not addressed. Um, and I think as parents, that's where the responsibility of being a better version of you for your children is 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 paramount, is absolutely pivotal to rearing of children. Um, because otherwise, the alternative is the adult who can't make decisions, who doesn't know their self worth, who lets people treat them however they were treated when they were younger, because when they were younger they didn't have a voice. Well, now as you're older, you also don't have a voice, and you're letting people walk all over you. Well, why? Because your parent took out frustrations on you that they didn't understand at the time, that you just had to put up with because you had no defense systems at that age, at 2, 3, 4 years old. And if a parent often does that, it's oftentimes they won't see changes as they bring up their children. Um, it's a constant battle to want to change, to want to be better, and like for me personally, with my daughter, it's like you're constantly thinking once you start to reflect, am I doing every single last thing that I can for this child? Like, is there anything that I'm currently doing that is benefiting me in the moment that puts her second in a way in which is unfair and selfish?
Mm. Yeah, again, going back to like the emotional side, and it's why like I love the quote so much that children cannot be what they cannot see, because
Yeah.
they learn everything from us, and how we treat them, and just how the parent goes about their daily life. So it's like if the parent is experiencing anger, frustration, um, just overly emotional, like the child is observing all the time of how the
Mm,
parent is dealing with that emotion. So if the parent is again feeling angry or frustrated, the and they're displaying it in a unhealthy way, that child is now going to think, okay, this is how I deal with frustration, this is how I deal with anger. But then when that child does display that,
mm,
like just replicates what the parent is, they then get punished.
yeah.
And I just, from that point of view, it's just, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean that's a like extremely valid point with like children become what you show them, right? And like you said, you cannot be what you cannot see. So what you see is what you like are, right?
Mm.
As children, because children model their behavior off of us. Like children have temperaments, like varying temperaments that might be different from the parents or the siblings, but ultimately, if you exhibit behaviors like you said, like aggression, frustration, outwards into the world as the parent, your child is going to see that and like you said, like think, well, this is how I must respond to it. But in the same way that they learn language from us and like obviously they have the capacity for language, and but without sort of us teaching them, then they don't learn. They have the capacity for frustration and aggression and and these more sort of associated negative emotions. And the more they see them, the more they're going to exhibit those behaviors. Um, and from the parent's point of view, well, the parent doesn't like seeing the child exhibit these behaviors, so yes, they're punished. And now the child thinks, well, you do it, you don't get punished, so why do I when I do it? But I think if that happens, the parent doesn't reflect enough to know that they are the source.
Mm.
They don't look at themselves hard enough and think, is it me that's sort of that's creating this version of this child that I'm witnessing daily? Like, is it me? And like once they get to like nursery and school ages, then there is different socializations that the child is subject to. But most of what you see is going to come from the home.
Mm. The idea as well, it's just come to me, was children have to accept. their
Yeah.
parents'
Mm.
emotions and how it's expressed. So why is that not the case for children? Like why as a parent do we not accept how they express, even though they don't have
Mm.
experience, they don't have the tools to express it in the correct way. But from the parent side, because the child can't question, they just have to accept anyway.
Yeah. Well, the parent is unsettled when the child exhibits those behaviors. And again, if the parent isn't reflecting, the parent feels unsettled when the child exhibits frustration and aggression. That then, as a result of the unsettled feeling that the parent gets, frustrations come back out towards the children, and it's just this like um uh like negative conditioning of the child to react in that way, to react in the way of frustration and aggression, because again, that's all they're ever met with. They're not met with compassion and empathy, um, and all children, even if they don't exhibit a lot of frustration or aggression, are going to test boundaries of the parent. They're going to it's just going to happen. And I think as the parent, you need to understand that what if this is always going to happen, then I can either look at this in a way in which is negative, and they're pushing my buttons, and they're doing these things on purpose, and the child knows exactly what they're doing. Um, or we can look at it in a way in which, well, how else are they going to learn? And if our job is to teach them, how else are they going to learn to explore the boundaries that we haven't explored with them? Because as the parent, it's hard to do everything. It's hard to cover everything. So when the child gets to an age of being a little bit more social, or knowing that they have the capacity for aggression, um, why wouldn't they try to test them? Like that's like a physical expression of asking a question. Like children mentally understand that if they ask a question, they will hopefully get an answer. Um, but instead of, let's say, asking, "Is it okay to hit the wall, daddy or mummy?" They're not going to ask that. They're just going to do it. And then you've got to almost see it as if it were a question, as in a like, don't overreact and be like, no, no, you can't do that, and so on and so forth, and that's bad, or whatever else that normally comes along with that. As opposed, see it as if it's okay, well, the child has just done this. Let me just think about this for a moment, and then we're going to address it, and maybe your partner's there, and you can talk to them about it, and then come to the child and go through it with them, as opposed to seeing that, oh, you're really trying to get me today, aren't you? You're really trying to test me and push my buttons, and then when we see it like that, we act in frustration, as opposed to the compassion with, well, they're just asking a question, but in a physical form.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Going back to um, the sort of roles within parenthood, like what do you define as like what is the role of the mother and what is the role of the father?
Mm. Broadly speaking, the role of the mother is obviously largely the nurturer, the usually the primary caregiver, um, the one who shows compassion and love and affection towards the child, um, probably a lot more than the father ever could. Now, not because the father can't, but because women are a lot more people orientated. Women are naturally a lot better at nurturing just people in general, but obviously also children, than fathers are. But with fathers, obviously that is there, right? And the love is there, and the ability to really care about your child is there. Um, but through the direction of bringing them up in a way in which they can navigate social spaces in the world correctly. And I mean, ultimately, so that when they get to the stage where they do start to socialize, that they are social people, that they're people that other children would like to play with, because I think fathers have a lot easier of a time setting boundaries than mothers do, because I think setting boundaries when when the mum tries to do it, and again, not that mothers can't, but it almost feels like it goes against their love for their children to set firm boundaries. Um, so for the father to introduce play, like physical play with the child, um, and almost controlled aggressive play as well, to allow the child to know when too much is enough.
Mm.
Because otherwise, if that's also never learned, when the child does start to socialize with other children, they might not know that kicking them is a bad thing. They might not know that hitting other children is a bad thing. Um, and not in a not bad in a way in which it makes you the individual bad, but bad in a way in which it will make no other children want to interact with you, because they fear getting hit at that point. So with fathers, if play is introduced sort of early on, as like once the child isn't just flimsy anymore, and once they can start um, sort of holding themselves up, um, and things like that type of movement with the dad is really important for social navigation as they get older, and eventually as they sort of become adults, and they understand relationships between people. Um, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. So ideally, then the role of like the father is to teach them life outside of the family.
Mm. Yeah.
And like if you think about that with like single mothers, for instance, like how impactful that role is of a father.
Mm.
Like for a child not to experience that, like what does that look like in later life, in adult life,
But it depends if
and can that be supplemented somewhere else?
um it depends if the father is fully absent or the mother is just single because of separation. So if the mother is single because of separation, providing obviously the father has still quite a prominent role in the child's life, then of course it can. Like the father can then give the child everything that's needed. Like maybe the family dynamic is a little bit different, and the child um, maybe doesn't get the full benefits of the traditional nuclear family, but the social engineering and networking abilities that the child then can have later on in life, if the father is present in their role of supplying that, um, then yes. If the father is just absent and the mother has a family support system, let's say a father who's quite masculine, or a brother who's quite masculine, even an uncle who's also masculine, maybe even a male friend who also exhibits those traits, then those things can be got elsewhere for the child, providing that role is consistent for whoever that male role model is. Um, because there's lots of places sort of around the world, and obviously different cultures have different traditions as it comes to these types of things, and and if you look at a lot of tribes, let's say, there's often times whoever the leader of the tribe is plays that masculine role model for children, let's say in the village, that isn't necessarily played by the father. So of course it can. Um, Now, if the mother is single and the father is absent, and there aren't these male role models, maybe she was brought up in a single parent household, the one thing that you really don't want to do is neglect the role of a father and its importance. So if you were brought up in a single parent home with a single mum, you very likely have a an automated view on men that is less than desirable than if there was a two-parent household. Um, you want to try and come away from that as much as possible, because if we see men as, let's say, untrustworthy, and they're just going to abandon me, let's say how your mum was abandoned and maybe you were abandoned being left with this child, even though that's been your experience, that isn't men. It does happen. It happens quite a lot, but that isn't all men. And men have quite a pivotal role in bringing up children, like we've just discussed. So if you're a single mother, then I think one of the best things that you can do is is to not just accept that, like be okay with it in the moments that you're there. Try to exhibit the role of the father, and also try to hopefully find someone that you do want to spend your life with, and don't fall into the trap of just finding someone and being okay just because you've found someone. Like you really need to make sure that they're okay, and and you need to make sure that they're willing, as early as possible, like first couple of dates, asking them, are you willing to be this person for my child, for my daughter, or for my son? Because obviously this really matters to me. Um, so in those instances, like you've obviously got a couple of different scenarios there, but regardless of which scenario you fall into, the lack of a father causes resentment towards men for the children, which as they grow up it's very hard for them to navigate socially, and they also don't know how to respond to men either. And because the common masculine traits that are normal, like a lot of people see as bad now, because a lot of people grew up without these male figures in their life, and because they were never there, when we exhibit them later on in our lives, in our late teens, in our 20s, we think, whoa, like why are you behaving like that? But it's not a why are you behaving like that. Like sometimes that's how men behave, and I'm not talking about like the really bad things that the obviously some men can, like some like men do exhibit, but just the normal sort of masculine, like um sort of bluntness and abruptness and sort of being straight and sort of to the point, and we don't really know how to navigate that later in life if we've never had the opportunity to navigate it early on. So not only does it affect the children then, but it obviously just carries through.
I suppose that goes into belief systems as well, um, because essentially we've not necessarily gotten that belief from our mother, but because we've also experienced it as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I would say that largely does come from the mother and how the mother responds to the child about the father.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we'll cover that on a different, on a separate
Yeah.
podcast. Do you think that we've largely lost mothers have lost their instincts, motherly instincts?
I think a lot is supplemented for us. A lot of it is attempted to be spoon fed. And the more that we're spoon fed, the less that we do by ourselves, the less that we have to explore and uncover. Because I think this is the one, well, not the one, but one of the issues with the rise in technology, where almost any information is available to you. Well, now that it's all out there, why would I have to think for myself? Now that I get obviously so many appointments with my midwife, and not that that's a bad thing, it's a good thing, but we rely on them for all of the information to to if we have questions, for them to have to say yes for us to do things, and and even post birth with health visitors, is that we wait for them to come to tell us what to do next. Now, this isn't always going to be true, but I think for mothers and fathers who again, because the family's been largely taken away in recent decades, and sort of the usual family structure of the two parents, like at least two, three, maybe even four siblings. Um, if that's there, you get to understand lots of things, and all of the relationships that everyone has with each other, and and especially if you have a younger sibling, also how to take care of someone because you see people take care of them. And if that doesn't happen, if you're in a single sort of child house, or you're in a single parent house, um um or if you just don't really have good relationships with your family, when you do start to navigate parenthood, you're going to want to lean on all of these people more so that, than if it wasn't true. So yes, but not as a result of the fact that it's not there and that we don't have the ability to use it and tap into it. Because whilst children, it's scary when they're here, like early on when you've just given birth, it's really difficult. You don't know what to do. You don't know what's normal and what's not normal. Um, but the I think if you strip it all back and look at the fundamental needs of a newborn baby, it appears quite simple on paper. And anything outside of that, then seek help, right? Like if your child's feeding regularly, like they're generally supposed to have disrupted sleep, and it's really hard for them to settle into a routine that early on. And it just feels like it constantly gets worse as well, which makes it really difficult. You feel like you're getting somewhere, then the child has a sleep regression, and you don't know if it's normal or not, and then you start to panic and you start to sort of ask everyone around you, like what am I supposed to do? But if the unless the child is, like, let's say, in pain, or you feel like they're in danger, or they're coming up with sort of rashes or reactions that they probably shouldn't be having, then of course at that point, like seek advice, go to the hospital, do what you need to do. But I think just try to make it as simple as possible, as take care of your child's needs, the needs of love, warmth, comfort, connection, um, of feeding, and of changing, and with that keeping clean. If those three things are being met, let's say, like, and you know that they're being met, and they're still reacting in a way in which you don't think that they should be reacting, then take them to the hospital, the doctor, and then maybe seek advice. But like it's it's like there's 100,000 years worth of human evolution, um, sort of that's in us, and especially for the mothers, on how to nurture for a child. Um, and yeah, I think tapping into that a little bit more than we do is could only be beneficial.
Because I think as well, like regarding the health visitors, is it would be helpful if they all said the same thing. But I think
Mm.
um, just from a couple of things that I've heard from health visitors is like the idea that the baby must fit around you. And I think, like, what's your opinion on that? Just that statement alone.
I think the first point about the health visitors, it would be helpful if they all said the same thing. Um, I agree to the extent um, in which there's foundational sort of information that is going to help, but obviously, like, each parent is going to struggle with different things, so then it's obviously going to be hard for that to sort of act out, because there are a lot of nuances with being a new parent, and even a second or a third time parent. Maybe there's things that you didn't face with your other children that maybe you need help with. But I think it, sort of on that second point of whether or not we should fit around the child's life or the child should fit around our life is that we, once a parent, a mother, a father becomes a parent, we don't necessarily anticipate the struggle and the freedoms that we do lose. So it's a nice thought that, well, what if the children could just fit around my schedule? And let's say that's said by a health visitor, that's going to make you feel good as a parent. It's going to make you think, oh, really?
Mm.
And but let's zoom out a little bit. Zoom out a little bit from you and and zoom out where you now see the family. And yes, that the mother and the father might be struggling and there's going to be loads of reasons for that. But for a child to be born into a family, the child the child's needs, as we mentioned earlier, do supersede the parent as far as they are needs. As they get older, like their needs become it's not only their needs that you need to attend to on a daily basis, also their wants, but when they're really young, it is a need. And I think we've also taken away from the word need itself because we use it out of the context in which it should be used. It's a, I need to go get some food. It's like, well, you don't, you'd like to. But we use the word, and what we do is we desensitize it to the point where we don't see needs as what they should be, because needs are, well, without it, I suffer. Because that's what a need is, right? Like if I don't get this thing, I really suffer. So if a child's need isn't being met, that let's say the parent latches on to what that health visitor has said and um, starts allowing the child to self-soothe. Um, well, as the parent, I feel like I could do with some more time. When I put the child down, I would just like to put it down. It can cry and it can go to sleep. Now, you as the parent wins there, but by you winning, the child loses. And it's not just that the child loses, it's that the need of the child is lost. The need, and when we spoke about need, it was the cleanliness, the change in the food, um, and then the love, comfort, warmth, and connection, right? Your child now loses connection with their primary caregiver, which oftentimes, again, like is going to be the mother. That they early on they're going to be a lot more connected with the mother than they are the father. So if the child is self soothed, it'll lose the connection. It'll lose the warmth of the embrace when the child feels like that they need something. But it's also for the child who's helpless and can't get out that cot in a dark room. Like, what is that? But for the parent who just feels like they need 5 minutes, or that it's okay because the child will eventually self soothe, they will eventually self soothe, but at the cost of your connection with them. And it's also going to be harder to move forward as they get a little bit older. Even, they're going to struggle to come to you with things and their problems because they had a problem when they were younger and it wasn't attended to. So like the cost of seeing, now see this is just one example, but the cost of seeing the child's needs not as great as ours is a problem. Um, Again, once the child gets a little bit older, and then you can assess whether or not it's a need or a want, and you can do sort of risk and cost sort of comparisons between the two. You can do that as they get older. It's a lot easier to do that as they get older. And it's a lot easier for a child who's 3, 4, 5, 6 and up to fit into your life. Because they then have the capacity to understand, they develop theory of mind, that they develop empathy, But before then, when they're like 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, they don't have the capacity for those things. So when they need something, it really is a need. And it's not just a want. Whereas what we want is a want. And that's the toss up. That's the thing that you're sacrificing if you view it as just be all and end all, the child's here to fit around me. So this quote, and I think it follows on quite nicely from what we've just spoken about as well. Your kids want to have the best relationship with you that they possibly could have. Like they're 100% on board with that idea, way more than anyone you've ever met in your life. And that means that you could have the best relationship with them that you've ever had with anyone. And that's what they offer you. And it's up to you to realize that, and you could have it. And that's a hell of an opportunity, right? And even if you've been beat around a lot and betrayed and hurt in your life, you've got those little kids and they're thinking, what do you want to do, Dad? You know, and if you're bitter, that will cut you to the quick and you'll hurt them, and you don't want to do that. And that's by Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's a wonderful man, but it's really true that your children will love you way more than you could ever love them, and even though like when I first had that thought, it's a little bit unsettling. It's just like, wait, no, I do love them, but it's not about that. It's not about the fact of whether or not you love them more than they love you, but when they're young, and if you give them those needs that they do need, they are there. They're waiting for you. And you'll notice this when children start to walk. Guess what they start to do? They follow you around. They wait for you. They want to help you. They want to do everything for you. But how many of us can say that that's what we want to do for our children? And how many of us can say that I'd live my life solely for you, the child? How much do I do just for you? Now we do a lot, and I think all of us want to try our best, but a reflection on our behaviors is always important to navigate whilst we're experiencing parenthood, and it doesn't stop. But for the child, that's inbuilt into them. That's their predisposition is you, right? And yes, so I think it's a really important consideration, and yeah, I think obviously if you guys have got any questions, then just let us know in the comments, and I think at the end of every month or something, we'll have an episode where we put together a load of these questions and answer them. Yeah, I think that's us.